What's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is going to be the second episode, episode 2, and this one's going to be about bike setting up and fine-tuning for your personal liking. We're going to talk about lever position, we're going to talk about suspension setup, maybe a little bit about tire pressure, but for the most part, I really want to focus on is lever position, why that can really affect how your hands feel on the bike. And then suspension setup, which is probably the most important, so I'm going to focus a lot on that. In my case, I have a coil in the rear, so we're going to not talk too much about the coil, but we're going to talk a lot about the air side of things. So in my case, it'll just be the fork, but a lot of you guys, the fork air will correlate back over to if you have an air shock in the back. But I will make sure I cover a little bit about the coil. And I hope you guys enjoy this video, so let's hop into it. So as you can see, I got some new parts from the last video. I did do a few upgrades. I decided to replace the grips. They were definitely starting to fade away, and then along with some a new front tire, and I got some new cranks and a spindle along with the new drivetrain. So besides that, we're going to go ahead and get into the lever position and why that can be really important. Lever position isn't necessarily one of the most important, but it definitely makes you a lot more confident as a rider. I always rode with my levers way down, which pitched my shoulders forward, which is fine for cross country or more flat terrain, slower pace, that's fine. But when you decide to get into something that's a little bit more steep or a little bit more gnarly, definitely out west where things can be a little bit steeper in sections or you're going to be at higher speeds, I would definitely focus on maybe having your levers pitched upward. I tend to see a lot of people riding really steep terrain and saying, oh, I'm all over the place, and all it took was me helping them flip the levers up, and it changed the way that they ride their bike. The biggest reason for that is if the levers are up, it's going to pitch your arms back a little bit, and it's going to give you a lot more of a straight line through the bars and not be pitched over, which is going to force you to pop off or throw your shoulders forward, which will throw you weight over the front of the bike too much. With it more flat, it will keep your chest up. You will look a little bit further ahead of you on the trail, which is always a good thing, especially when you're going faster. You want to make sure that you can see what's in front of you and coming up next so you can plan your route of attack. And same thing with shifter lever, in my opinion, on this side, and then my dropper lever on this side. It's all preference. I like mine to be tilted up more towards me so I can have access to it better and I don't have to come down up under the bars to activate any of those levers. Let's get on to suspension setup. That is hands down the most important thing, and I really want to emphasize a lot of that on this video. So let's get to it. We're going to go ahead and talk about the front fork. I have, in this case, the Fox 36. One of the things you're going to need to adjust this is going to be a shock pump. These pumps are rated for up to 300 psi, so a regular floor pump will not work. Make sure you pick one up because you should always have one of these. Not always on hand, but at least as a tool. You can get them pretty cheap on Amazon, or in my case, I went ahead and got a digital gauge one because I'm picky. And I can see the exact pressure that I want and be really accurate with it. So there's a few different dials on here. I'm going to kind of go over the basics behind them. A lot of people have questions. This will correlate from the rear shock and the front shock, especially if they're both air. The same exact principles will come into play. So for rebound, which is 90% of the time always on the bottom of the fork, there's going to be normally a red knob, and rebound is essentially how fast something comes back to its full travel. So if I push this in, it's going to rebound back to its full travel. You're going to normally see a bunny, which is going to be fast, and you're going to see a turtle, which is going to be slow. So if I go to hit a fast hit, and then it's gonna, if it's at its slowest position, it's gonna slowly come back to its full travel, right? Now, if I take a big hit and it's on its fastest speed, it's gonna come right back really fast. Sometimes it's gonna pogo you, meaning it's gonna like make you bounce all over the place, and that's not what you want. So I'm gonna give you some tips on setting that up. Almost every single fork, and if it doesn't have it on your fork, one of the things you should look up is online. I'm sure every company has some sort of base standards. That's where I would definitely start. In my case, with air pressure. That's where we're going to start with first. On my case, it's going to be the left fork, and that's going to be for the most forks and most companies. We're going to take out all the air on the air side of the fork, and then I'm going to look on the stanchions. In my case, it'll be on the left one. That's going to say your weight, and then along with your PSI rating. I would definitely take a look at that and make sure that your PSI rating is going to match for a really good base standard and a good starting point. So this is going to be my air cap. You're going to go ahead and screw this off. Like I said, this is going to be very close to every single person's fork. I'm going to set that off to the side so I don't lose it. And you're going to see a valve here. That's going to be where you're going to put your air in. Now I'm going to record to make sure that I know where my original settings were to start with. And I'm reading at 65 PSI. All these settings have been tuned for me personally, and over time I have definitely perfected that art myself. So we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna let all the air out. In my case, I'm just gonna do it through here. You can also take like a little needle or something and press all the air out. But I'm gonna slowly release all the air. You don't want to just shoot it all out at once. It's not good for the seals and not good for the fork itself. Maybe give it a little bit of a press. So one of the mistakes that I see a lot from people is they'll look down at the pressure that they're supposed to be at, and then they're like, oh, well, the fork keeps diving a little bit, I just need to put more pressure. It's not the case. We'll get to that here in a minute. But in my case, I'm going to pump it back up to 65. And this is really, really, really important, and I want to emphasize this a ton. Get to about 15 to 20 PSI. Well, I need my fork to rise first. That's fine, 30 PSI. We're going to cycle the fork a little bit. That's going to help transfer the air between the positive side and the negative side. You really don't need to push it too much. Then I'm going to pump it back up to about 40 or 50. Alright. Do the same thing. I'm going to cycle the fork again. Alright. And then I'm going to pump it. See, I'm dropping pressure, so what's happening is it's pushing air and shifting it through the negative chamber, which helps with damping. The reason you'll know that there's no air in the negative chamber if you don't do this is if you're riding and it's just super stiff, no matter what pressure you set it at, it's because there's no air pushing the fork back to travel. Alright, we're going to go to 57. Once again, I'm going to push it, kind of help that air shift to the negative chamber. Now a lot of people ask me, what is compression, what is rebound? I already explained what rebound was, but compression I want to explain a little bit about, because that can be a little bit confusing, but it's pretty much the opposite of rebound. Rebound is the fork coming back to its full travel, and then compression is how fast you can let this thing compress. Air is not the same as compression. They're two completely different things. So there's going to be fluid in here. I'm representing this as the fork, by the way. There's fluid down in the stanchions, and what's happening essentially is when this fork compresses, the air is a resistance, and then there's also the fluid that's getting pushed from one side to the other as the fork compresses, and there's little valves in there. So as the fork compresses, it has to allow the fluid to go through those valves, and the valves get smaller the more compression there is, so the fork essentially will compress slower. Hence the word compression, compress. So compression has everything to do with how fast the fork will compress, and then rebound is how fast the fork will come back to its full travel. So now that we have pumped our bike back up to our desired pressure or the pressure that is put into the fork, one of the ways that you can tell that you've set it to a good starting point is you're going to take this rubber ring. If you don't have one, get a buddy. It will make life a lot easier. Do not put a zip tie on here because I feel like that will just scratch your stanchions. That's up to you. I didn't tell you to do it. So everyone should have potentially either a rubber ring, or you can put something around it, or you can get a friend to look at the fork for you. You then will have this rubber ring put down at the bottom. Put on all your riding gear. In my case, I have pretty much what I'll be riding with, and just get into the attack position. So stand on your bike. It's easier if you have a friend to do this or a wall to help you. And you're going to go here, nice and easy, back down, and then you're going to look at where that rubber ring is. In my case, this is a little bit too much. You want to be about 30% of your full travel. So in my case, I would say this is probably close to 15 to maybe 20%. So I definitely want this rubber ring to be a little bit more up, because this is full travel about here, which in my case that looks about 30% to me. So this is my preferred preference, is to have it a little bit stiffer, but that's just me. I would definitely start with a 30% sag. Some forks like RockShox has little guidelines on the side. Make sure it's at 30%. It's a perfect place to start. And then let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of these dials that can be really confusing, especially if you don't know what you're talking about or what you're looking at and why there's so many different knobs. First off, we're going to start with compression. Compression is a pretty complicated one. Some people will have, if you have a Fox fork or a RockShox fork in the higher end versions, you will have, in my case, two dials. One is low speed compression, and then one is high speed compression. Compression is normally a blue knob. In this case, they are both on top of the fork, and that is normally how it is. There are some cases where compression and rebound are both on the bottom of the fork. So this is my air side. This has something to do completely different with what compression and rebound have to do with the bike. Definitely go ahead and look on your factories or the manufacturing website to look at base settings to find where you should start. And if it works for you and you don't know anything about it, set it and forget it. Yes, there's going to be completely tons of different adjustments you can do, but set it and forget it unless you know what you're doing, because otherwise things get way out of whack. I will go over a small tip if you do want to go into depth with tuning this suspension with these dials and you don't know what you're talking about. So with rebound, there's a few things that can come into play. In my bike, I have high speed and low speed rebound. Now, one of the biggest things too is to look in the manufacturing website and start with the base settings, because that's the best place to start, and then you can start adjusting from there. But the biggest thing that you always want to do is, your rebound has gotten too far or too fast, if you are able to leave the front wheel off the ground. And the best way to test that is if you press down on your suspension and let it go fast. You can see mine's on the slower side, and then it comes back to its full travel. You don't see the front wheel lifting off the ground. If I press down, the fork is a lot slower. I probably should speed this up a little bit in my opinion, but you can see the fork doesn't leave the ground, and that's perfect. Now, there's some cases where that can be changed, but that differs between the rider. But for your basics and for the safest way is definitely make sure that front wheel does not come off the ground when you do that test. Now let's go ahead into the rear. It's going to be short and sweet, but the same thing will be with the rear as you did with the front. So like I said before, this is kind of dirty actually. It's going to be the same thing if you have an air can. In my case, I have a coil. You're going to set up your sag. Normally in the rear, people set their sag up to about, I don't know, 25%, 20%, depending on how stiff you want the rear end of the bike to be. And then compression and rebound, like I said, blue knobs are normally compression. In my case, I have a lever. Make sure that it's always in the open position unless you are climbing, because you're not going to get more pedal efficiency and you're going to probably blow out your shock if you decide to leave this knob completely open all the time. It's not the best for your shock. And then rebound in my case is going to be a red knob. I have high speed and low speed compression. I changed that with Allen keys. There's a 3mm. I know this video is probably a little bit longer than I planned on it initially being, but that is because I really want to emphasize how important suspension setup is and how important some of these small little changes can actually affect how confident you are on the bike. You would be surprised how many people I've just in the parking lot spending 10 minutes on their bike, going ahead just taking all the air out and kind of setting them back to square one with compression and with rebound settings, and then next thing you know they're on the trail like, whoa, my bike feels completely different, because that's how it's made to feel. And when you start tuning and putting stuff places you don't really know where they're going and what they're doing, it can kind of throw you sideways and make you a less confident rider, which then will make you not ride as well or not ride as confidently and not really get to your full abilities or get what the bike is meant to have done to it, which is eat up all the chunk. So one of my favorite things is to kind of tune some suspension and make sure everything's working well, because if you think about it, the suspension is the bike. That is kind of really what's taking the beating and really what's saving you from certain falls in certain areas. So definitely treat her well. I know everyone loves their bike, so make sure that you definitely take care of your suspension and really tune it down to what's preferable to you. And then also definitely focus on the levers, don't forget. But one last tip I want to leave you guys with is how to tune if you do happen to have high speed and low speed compression without getting too far off from the whole craziness, because I definitely sometimes have to set myself back to square one because there's so many dials. Now, one of the best ways I have found for me to set up the fork in my case, you can do it also with the rear shock, but start with one and then move to the other. Find a super short, sweet, has a little bit of everything, maybe a corner involved would be awesome. Kind of little downhill section that has some roots, some rocks, also some flat sections, and maybe like a little turn. Nothing longer than 30 seconds, because otherwise it'll take all day and maybe even longer. So you're going to start with the basic rebound on the floor and make sure that your PSI is good as well. And then you're going to go to start with maybe low speed or high speed compression, and that's a good place to start, just with one. So you're going to bracket. You're going to go up to the top, ride down. That's your base. Cool. What did you like? What did you not like? And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the low speed compression, go up 2, so you're going to go clockwise 2 turns, ride down. Did it feel better? Did it feel worse? If it felt the same or it felt better, go 2 more clicks. Ride it down. Oh, it felt worse. Go back 1 click. Felt good. Boom, leave it. And then you're going to do that with all the knobs, with high speed compression, low speed compression, high speed rebound, low speed rebound. And then you're going to do the same exact thing with the shock. And also in the back as well. Also keep an eye on this. If you are bottoming this out or you're not using full travel, maybe you have too much air inside. That is definitely something you want to focus on, especially when you first retune your suspension. Throw this rubber ring or something down at the bottom, and then make sure that you are using full travel, because why have 100, in my case 170 millimeters of travel and not use it all? It's pointless. I see too many people do some crazy epic rides for 4 hours with me and they've only used this much travel, and we did some pretty steep, crazy descents. So they it's too stiff, they're losing feeling in their hands. This is probably half the reason right here, is because their suspension isn't tuned correctly. And that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed, and make sure to like and subscribe for more stuff. I have some more videos coming that are going to be super exciting. I hope you guys will enjoy the up and coming videos. Other than just trail riding, I'm going to be continuing this series of videos, and I hope you guys can comment below and let me know what you would like to see more of, or what you would like to see less of, I guess, in this case. And yeah, hope you enjoy. Check out the first episode if you haven't already, and see you in the next one.